Before we go into names and matchups, there is one thing people consistently misunderstand about Australian Open. Early rounds don't show readiness, they show who can stay comfortable. This breakdown is about cost, not predictions. Before we even talk about matchups, Quarter 1 of this Australian Open draw comes with a major strategic storyline. World number 1 Carlos Alcaraz enters this tournament without Juan Carlos Ferrero, the coach who guided him from a teenager to the very top of the sport. And at elite level, a change like this is never background noise. Ferrero wasn't just a coach, he was a developmental architect. 7 years together, 6 Grand Slam titles, a complete identity built from junior level to dominance. The split wasn't about conflict, it was about direction, different visions for the next phase. And while Alcaraz remains the favorite in this quarter, this kind of change subtly affects pre-match preparation, in-match decision making and emotional management under pressure. That's important in Melbourne. So Quarter 1 looks controlled on paper, but it's not a free passage. The danger here isn't losing early, it's spending too much energy too soon. And with a new coaching structure, efficiency matters even more. So let's look the key matchups, starting with Alexander Bublik versus Jenson Brooksby. This is one of the most disruptive first round matches in the entire draw. Brooksby is a rhythm breaker. He absorbs pace, changes ball height and forces uncomfortable patterns. Bublik, on the other hand, thrives on emotion and momentum. If this turns chaotic, Bublik can dominance, but if it becomes structured and repetitive, Brooksby has a real chance to drag this into deep water. This is a match that creates mental fatigue, not just physical. Next, Alex de Minaur versus Matteo Berrettini. This matchup is especially interesting on Australian soil. De Minaur arrives confident, sharp and extremely comfortable in these conditions. Berrettini's serve and forehand are always dangerous, but after injuries, the key question is sustainability. If de Minaur gets enough returns back early, this match shifts from power to legs. And over time, legs decide more matches than weapons. So let's talk dark horse pressure. This quarter also contains players capable of creating second week problems, not necessarily by producing upsets, but by forcing demanding matches around the favorite. Like Sebastian Korda, he has matured tactically. His serve patterns are cleaner and he is more willing to step inside the baseline. Tommy Paul applies constant physical pressure. He doesn't give you free points and quietly drains energy over long rallies. And Alejandro Davidovich Fokina remains one of the most unpredictable players on tour, capable of brilliance or chaos within the same set. These are players who turn early rounds into work days. From a coaching perspective, Quarter 1 is about discipline, efficient patterns, emotional control, no chasing quick wins. If Alcaraz navigates this quarter cleanly, he is well positioned. If not, the cost shows up later. Quarter 1 doesn't make headlines, but it lays the foundation for everything that follows. And in Melbourne, foundations decide champions. This second quarter is very important because this is Alexander Zverev's half of the draw. Zverev comes into the Australian Open knowing this is one of the cleanest opportunities he's had at a slam in years. Physically, he looks solid again, the serve is back as a real weapon, and tactically he is playing much more patient tennis compared to previous season. The big question with Zverev here is not tennis level, it's emotional management. If he avoids early 5-set marathons, this quarter clearly opens up for him. Early on, Players like Giovanni Pesci-Pericard, Alexander Müller and Roman Safiullin type profiles can be tricky because they hit flat and fast, not dangerous on paper but uncomfortable if Zverev starts slow. But the real storyline in this quarter is the new Medvedev. Medvedev is the most dangerous player in this section if his nerves hold. Tactically, this surface still suits him. Deep positioning, long rallies, absorbing pace, forcing opponents to hit extra balls. However, Medvedev's season has shown us something very clear. When he is calm, he can beat anyone. When frustration kicks in, he can self-destruct very quickly. If he starts arguing with the box, with umpires, with conditions, this quarter becomes wide open. The key potential clashes to watch here. Zverev versus Medvedev is the obvious heavyweight collision. This matchup is always physical and mental. Long rallies, extended baseline exchanges, and whoever controls depth wins. Humbert is a dangerous floater in this section. Lefty serve, early ball striking, very capable of taking time away from both Zverev and Medvedev if he is feeling confident. Alex Mikkelsen is another name worth mentioning. Young, furious, aggressive return position. He doesn't carry pressure and that makes him dangerous in early rounds. Fabian Marozsan is someone I'm watching closely. Very creative, unpredictable shot selection. Against structured players like Zverev or Medvedev, he can disrupt rhythm, especially in best of 5. So this quarter is about control. Zverev needs to control tempo, emotions and length of rallies. And Medvedev needs to control his mindset, frustration, match momentum swings. If both do that, we're likely heading toward a high-level Zverev-Medvedev collision. If not, this is the quarter where an outsider can sneak into the second week. Let's check some key player profiles like Hurkacz. Hurkacz is always a factor on hard courts, especially early in tournaments. His serve and first strike patterns can dominate anyone. But Melbourne tests something very specific. What happens when points don't end quickly? Extended rallies, return pressure, and heat expose whether his game can stay efficient over time. This quarter doesn't punish big servers immediately, it challenges their sustainability. I'm looking for Karen Khachanov here. Physical presence, rhythm dependent. Khachanov is one of those players who looks extremely solid when he controls tempo. Big ground strokes, strong court positioning, very physical baseline presence. But when rhythm breaks, when balls come lower, slower or within variation, he can be put into uncomfortable decision making. Quarter 2 is full of players who do exactly that. Let's talk Frances Tiafoe. Energy versus structure. Tiafoe thrives on emotion, crowd energy and momentum. If matches become long and procedural, he's forced to find discipline rather than inspiration. Quarter 2 asks, can you stay locked in when the match stops being exciting? And some rhythm disruptors. What makes quarter 2 dangerous is the number of players who don't allow rhythm. Players like Adrian Manarino, Cameron Norrie or Yoshioto Nishioka don't beat you with power. They beat you by changing pace, redirecting early, forcing extra shots. Against this player, nothing feels clean. And that's where frustration begins. So by the second and third rounds in Melbourne, recovery cycles matter. Players who spend too much time on court early often start feeling it here. Small details become expensive, like poor shot selection, unnecessary extensions, emotional reactions after missed chances. Quarter 2 doesn't eliminate favorites. It taxes them. From a coaching perspective, quarter 2 is where you protect your base. You don't experiment, you don't chase quick wins. You simplify patterns, manage energy, and accept that some matches will be ugly. Players who understand that usually survive. Quarter 3 is the emotional core of this draw, because this is the quarter of Novak Djokovic. And when Novak is in a section of the draw, the conversation changes. Novak Djokovic arrives in Melbourne not just as a contender, but as the most dominant player this tournament has ever seen. 10 Australian Open titles, unmatched consistency, unmatched ability to peak here. But this time the context is different. This could realistically be one of his last Australian Opens. And when players reach this stage of their career, Grand Slams stop being just tournaments. They became statements. Technically, Novak doesn't need to prove anything. What separates him here is not speed or power, it's his clarity under pressure. In this quarter, where matches get tighter and margins get smaller, that clarity is priceless. Novak knows exactly how to manage long rallies, emotional swings, critical moments late in sets. That's why this quarter bends around him. The real challenge for Novak here is not one specific opponent. It's managing physical load and motivation at the same time. Because every player in this section walks on court believing they are lacing history. And Novak has learned better than anyone how to suffocate that belief. Now let's talk about Grigor Dimitrov, talent, timing and trust. The second major storyline in this quarter is Grigor Dimitrov. Not because of potential, but because of where he is in his career right now. The match against Jannik Sinner was one of the highest level performances Grigor has produced in years. He wasn't just competing, he was dictating patterns, and then the injury came. That interruption matters, because at this stage of a career, injuries don't just stop matches. They stop momentum. Roger Federer recently spoke about that match. He said that while watching Grigor play Sinner, he started thinking about how he himself would have played against Sinner. That is a massive statement. It tells you that Grigor's tennis, when healthy and confident, is still read and respected at the very highest level. That's why Thomas Machac is such a dangerous first opponent. Machac takes time away, keeps the ball low, forces early decisions. Against a player rebuilding trust in their body and timing, this is extremely uncomfortable. This match will not be about brilliance, it will be about asserting clarity early. From a coaching perspective, quarter 3 is where careers peak. Novak plays from legacy and certainty. Grigor plays from experience and rediscovered belief. The difference here is not tennis, it's trust. Quarter 3 is not about who can play. It's about who can carry the weight of who they are. And that weight is very different for every player here. Quarter 3 is not about who can play. It's about who can carry the weight of who they are. And that weight is very different for every player here. Quarter 4 is one of the most fascinating sections of this draw, because this is Jannik Sinner's quarter. And at the same time, it's a quarter filled with players who can disrupt rhythm in very different ways. This quarter is not chaotic, it's sharp. Points are shorter, margins are thinner, and execution matters more than volume. This is the type of environment where small tactical decisions decide matches. Sinner arrives here as one of the most complete baseline players in the game. Clean ball striking, early timing, relentless pressure. What makes this quarter interesting for him is not his ability to hit winners. It's whether he can stay patient when matches ask him to wait. Quarter 4 doesn't reward urgency, it rewards controlled aggression. Let's check some key matchups. Ben Shelton versus Ugo Humbert. One of the most intriguing matchups in this quarter is Shelton against Humbert. Two left-handers, but completely different philosophies. Shelton brings raw power, athleticism, and momentum-based tennis. Humbert brings timing, early contact, and the ability to redirect pace effortlessly. This is a match where rhythm will decide everything. If Shelton dictates early, it can be explosive. If Humbert slows the tempo and takes time away, it becomes very uncomfortable. This isn't about who hits harder, it's about who controls the first two shots. And now let's talk about João Fonseca, that emerging name. Another name in this quarter that deserves attention. He represents the new generation of aggressive baseliners. Explosive forehand, fearless shot selection, very little respect for ranking or reputation. What makes João Fonseca dangerous is not consistency, it's belief. Young players like him don't manage energy, they spend it. And in early rounds, that freedom can be extremely dangerous for more established players. What connects Shelton, Humbert and Fonseca is not ranking, it's unpredictability. These are players who don't play long patterns, don't wait for permission, don't overthink consequences. Against someone like Sinner, that can create uncomfortable moments. Not because he is weaker, but because control is constantly challenged. From a coaching perspective, Sinner wins this quarter by resisting rush, accepting long rallies when necessary, finishing short points when they are clearly there, not forcing outcomes but letting pressure build on the other side. This is where maturity matters more than firepower. This quarter also represents a broader story in men's tennis, established contenders versus fearless newcomers. The question is not talent, it's who can stay emotionally neutral when momentum shifts. Quarter 4 is not about proving you belong, it's about proving you can finish. And that's what makes this section so compelling.